Sure.
Okay, welcome to Freedom's Light Discipleship Training. I was hoping Robbie and Jennifer would stroll in before Discipleship Training because I found a really nice farmhouse, high top table and 2 chairs to put up here instead of the podium. To give it a more fresh, modern look. Yeah. And the Lord just provided because I found it on Facebook. It was $85, and I hadn't seen anything that was so nice and looked so good. And it was in Calhoun, which is an hour away from me. And so I thought, well, Shannon said, well, Robbie, that's not too far from Robbie. So I text Robbie and I said, how far is Calhoun from you? And he said, I've got to do an enrollment in Calhoun in the morning. And it was they said it was literally like across the street from where they were. So that just worked out perfect. So maybe next week we'll have our modern looking table in here instead of a podium. So last week we left off with David in the cave of Adullam, which was near Bethlehem, where David was from, and that's where his family still resided, and we don't know. And then of course we had learned about those 400 men that were with him, and talking about they were sort of a type of the church because they were 400 disgruntled men who joined him. Now the disgruntled part didn't have anything to do with the church, but but just the 400, they were separated, these 400 men, and they came out and joined David in this cave of Adullam. And then, as we mentioned, I just want us to keep in mind that David is a type of Christ. So when we read this, we have to always find out, okay, well, how does this apply to the New Testament? Because that's what the Old Testament is. It's all about the New Testament. It's telling us what's to come. And so he's a type of Christ. And again, the 400 is a type of a remnant. That 400 was a remnant. That was the type of the church. And then, of course, Saul, that's easy to figure out who he represents, and that's Satan. And we'll see very soon how horrendous he's going to start. I mean, not that he hadn't already been acting horribly, but we're going to really see how evil he is. So let me ask you this. Did David and his disgruntled cohorts have the liberty of leaving the cave because they didn't feel like being there?
Yes and no.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, if they would have left, they were in the cave hiding for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah, now they could have just took their chances.
Yeah, and then you're going to go up against a king and his army.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, yeah, they could if they wanted to commit suicide, but no, they really didn't have the ability to leave, because, hey, I'm really tired of this and I think I'm going to leave. Well, then they're going to get killed. And so what I'm saying is that's the attitude we have to have. And we have to be the same way because, see, you've got to have a made-up mind. And if you don't have a made-up mind, then everything in the world is going to deter you. And I bet you if I interviewed every single one of you and got down to who you really are and what you really think, I bet it would surprise all of us what everybody thinks, because we think it's just me, right? But see, Satan comes to every single one of us, and we have to battle our thoughts every day. And he tells us lies every day about ourselves. And I really bet if I interviewed every one of you, I would find that you're hearing from Satan. You're hearing some stupid lie, And so that's why we got to get a made-up mind that we're going to take refuge in Jesus, and we're going to take refuge in the cave of Jesus. And like he says, he compares himself to a mother hen, where you've seen, and I don't have chickens, never have, but I've seen pictures of them where they put their little chicks under their wings, and you can't see them under there. And Jesus says that, and God says that's what I am, and that's what I want to be to you. I want to hide you under my wings, the shelter of my wings. And so we have to have a made-up mind, and here we go with David, and I think he's got a made-up mind. He's going to live. And I think he's got a made-up mind that he's going after God, and he trusts God that somehow, some way he's going to be delivered from this. And I may have said this last week, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Jeff never missed church because we didn't feel like going. Our kids never fought us about going to church. I tried to think, did our kids ever, I don't want to go. I cannot remember them ever saying that they didn't want to go to church. They never rebelled against us in that way. They never said they didn't want to go. Why? Because from infancy, they were raised in the pew. We kept them in the pew with us. We didn't go to the nursery unless we absolutely had to. We kept them in the pew. They played under the pew. They slept under the pew. And they just knew that church was a part of our lives, and they just knew not to ask. Because it wouldn't have worked. So I really can't recall that they ever complained or anything. We didn't go to sports practice on Wednesdays. They played basketball. Robbie played football. They never asked, we always told the coach, on day one that we would not be there on Wednesday night. And I saw on Instagram this post that says there is a 0.0296% chance that your child will become a professional athlete. But there is 100% chance your child will stand before Jesus.
Absolutely.
That should be on a bumper sticker, but if we don't.
Exactly. So my advice to you is get them to church and forget the sports stuff. You can fit that in. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, I always thought there should be a limited league for those who wanted to play some, but not make it their whole
Yes.
life, and
Yeah.
still have church and family activities. Seems like people would like that.
Exactly. Now we did homeschool. We did play homeschool sports, so we did have coaches that understood. And of course, Jeff was the coach at one time, and so he's not going to complain. Anyway, so I know that made it a little bit easier. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you don't have a choice, and you got to dig your heels in like David's doing, and you got to take a stand. And so I'll just say this, that Jeff, as the leader of our home, he set the tone. And we fell in line. And I know that a lot of women aren't going to like what I'm saying. But you know what? We fell in line or we got left behind. I mean, that was really the way it was. And so I think if you ask our children today, that they'll tell you that they're thankful for Jeff's leadership. But see, in order for him to do that, he first had to get a made-up mind for himself.
Yes.
He couldn't lead us until he got a made-up mind that he himself was going to make it. And you can't lead anyone until your own mind is made up for your own self. And if the father of the home doesn't have a made-up mind, where are the children going to be? The father is the rudder. And the children are just going to be thrown out, go overboard and sink if there's no rudder. So in verse 3, we're in chapter 22, verse 3. And it says, And David went thence to Mizpeh of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. We need to highlight that right there. Till I know what God will do for me. So that gives us a huge insight into what's going on in David's mind. He is taking a stand. He's digging his heels in. He knows that God is his source, and God is his provider, and God is his deliverer, and God is his protection. And then what amazes me is that he's going to the enemy. This is twice now he's gone to the enemy. But just think, I was thinking about this. Just like today, Israel is surrounded by enemies. They have no friends. You could say Jordan is a semi-friend, but they're not completely friends. And so it's the same today as it was back then. They're surrounded by enemies. So where are you going to go? We always say, well, if the United States falls, where are we going to go? There's nowhere to go. Literally, there's nowhere to go. And so this is how he is. Where am I going to go? And so he goes to the enemy. Moab was always Israel's enemies. Now, I don't know why, and the Bible doesn't tell us, and I'm sure there's more history we could dig into, but you know, why the king of Moab just doesn't kill him is beyond me. But he goes to the king of Moab, and maybe it's just strictly divine, protection that God puts over him. But he goes to this king of Moab, and he says, hey, can my parents reside with you here in Moab to keep from being killed until I know what God will do for me? So David is asking God. He's trusting God. He's waiting on God to give him direction. And what word do we use to describe these actions of waiting on God? Faith.
Yeah.
That's what faith is. I know that God's going to do something. I'm just waiting to see what he's going to do. And that's why I just, probably my very favorite book in the whole Bible is the book of Ruth. And Ruth lays at Boaz's feet. Boaz is Jesus. And she lays at his feet, and she asks him to redeem her. And then she goes back to Naomi the next day, and she tells Naomi what she did and how she did it and what he said and all that. And then Naomi said some life-changing words, at least they were for me. And she said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, she said, just wait and see how the matter will turn out. So no, we don't know, what God's going to do, but we don't know how he's going to do it. But you know what? You know he will, and you know he's your everything, and then you just wait and see how the matter will turn out. So I heard, Andrew Womack say that people who get cancer or some deadly disease, and then they set out to find God. And oftentimes they die because they don't have enough time. Now they may get saved, but they don't have enough time to really get the knowledge to know how to, receive from God. And sometimes, that they just waited too late and they're overcome. So what I'm asking today is, what are you waiting for? See, we don't want to wait till the trumpet sounds and then decide to believe, right? Because if you wait till then and get saved, you're going to pay with your head. And then we got to remember that David's entire family is in danger. His parents are in danger. His brothers are in danger. His little nieces and nephews are in danger. Everybody's in danger. You know why? Because those little tiny kids are going to grow up to be grown men who are going to be vengeful and want to avenge David's blood if he were to be killed. So that's why Saul's got to kill the entire family. That's how it was always done. So Saul wants to wipe out the whole line of David. He wants to wipe them off the map. So David, he may be acting, and we see this, that he's acting out of fear in some ways, and as anybody would. But we got that big insight there that yes, he's scared. Anybody, a normal human being would be, but he's got faith, and he believes that God is going to deliver him. So what we got to guard against, as we read this, and we need to learn this as watching him do it, we don't want to act out of fear. Because how many times that's our first inclination is to react and to act out of fear. But see, we want to do like David. Okay, maybe we do need to take some steps that to protect ourselves, but the bottom line is we've got to seek God first and foremost and believe that he's going to work this out for us. And then if you make a mistake, everybody does. David is. He makes mistakes, you know what? But God will, all things work together for good. Even if you make a mistake, God will still work it out for your good. So he may be acting out of the flesh somewhat. He may be acting out of fear at some points. But I think right here at this moment, he's decided that his answer is in finding out what God thinks and what God will do for him in this situation. And I thought about Peter walking on the water. And I thought that was an awesome example because he acted out of faith. He didn't act out of fear. He acted out of faith. He got out of the boat. He walked on top of the water. And then guess what? His mind got the better of him. He started thinking. Boy, if we could just turn off our thinkers sometimes, right? See, logic started kicking in. well, I can't walk on the water. So then guess what? See, his logic overcame his spirit. And then fear entered in. And then notice it said he began to sink. Now anybody that has tried to walk on the water know that it won't work, right? You immediately sink like a rock.
Yes.
So it doesn't even make sense that he began to sink. He didn't just plop in like a rock. He began to sink. I think that's so interesting. So this is implying that still, even in his doubts, he was defying gravity.
That's right.
And then Jesus got on to him. And he said, why can't you just believe? How many times I'm sure he said that to me or thought that, Leah, why can't you just believe?
Yeah.
I don't know, Lord, because I'm in this stupid body of flesh. So see, when we're in a situation, do we try to figure it out ourselves, or do we go to God and ask Him? I heard Dr. David Jeremiah said, I just caught a little bit of his sermon this morning, and he was talking about worry. And he said, how it's stupid and foolish, and he gave all kinds of scriptures about, it won't help you one iota and everything. But he said, the majority of Christians just worry and never ask.
Wow.
And I know the Lord told me that one time, not too long, like last year. And I sat there and worried for, probably a good hour, and I was having a problem with my jaw. And I didn't say anything, and I was just fretting over it and worrying about it and trying to, it was like out of whack or something. And then it just dawned on me, like, well, I should pray. I mean, I'm so slow, and then he told me, he said, you didn't, I didn't heal you because you didn't ask.
Yeah.
So we got to ask.
I heard somebody say this morning, let's see, worry is the repositioning. Hang on, please. The answer to worry is the repositioning of God.
Say that again.
The answer to worry is the repositioning of God.
Repositioning of God. So that's really giving Him the proper place in your
Yes.
life, in your thinking.
Yes.
It's all up here. It's all the way we think. I mean, the battle is literally between our ears.
It is.
And we're always sometimes going to wind up in that deep, dark cave, but we have the knowledge of knowing, even if we are, God is right there with us.
Amen.
Amen.
So verse 4, it says, and he brought them, speaking of David's parents, before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. I mean, to me, this is amazing. And again, I don't know if I should have looked into all the history of Moab, but I know that they were enemies of God. So for David's parents to be sheltered by the enemy king, I mean, I don't really understand that. So that's worth looking into.
And you mentioned about Ruth, and that's where.
Yes, she was from
Naomi
Moab.
was to Moab.
Yes, that's right.
Hmm.
And could it be that the king was looking at David like Benedict Arnold, like he was changing sides? I don't know. I mean, that's a possibility. But I think this is nothing more than the providential hand of God in the matter, keeping believers safe.
Yeah.
And David entrusting his parents to essentially the enemy. And then in verse 3 where we read that the king of Moab, was going to protect them. And in verse 4 it tells us that basically that, Moab was an enemy. I mean, they had never been friends of Israel.
It makes me think there are times in, I think, all of our lives when God uses somebody that's not a believer. He'll use worldly people to bless us or to protect us or something, and it makes no sense.
No.
Like when you try to think out, why would they have helped me?
Mm-hmm.
You would understand that from another believer.
Mm-hmm.
But so many times He's used somebody that were not believers at
Yeah,
all.
that's a good point, just as in this case.
Yeah.
So then the next verse, God speaks to David. And remember, at that time, the Holy Spirit he didn't indwell in the life of a believer. He would come and go. And so, they would have to go to the high priest to get a word from the Lord. unless they were a prophet or something. And of course the high priest was God's representation on earth, right? And he still speaks through, men of God today. But praise God, we don't have to go to a priest, right? We can go straight, and that's what that veil torn. The veil in the temple was torn between the holy and the holy of holies in the tabernacle, and that's what that represented. Was now you can go right into the holy of holies because of what Jesus did. And so, man, that is some good news. But here, David's going to hear from God, and we're going to notice how he's going to hear from God. He's not hearing from him just in his own spirit like we did, but he's hearing through a prophet. So you had to have a priest or a prophet to speak to you from God. Are we not thankful that you can actually hear from God? I mean, you could hear from him right now. He may have something to tell you right now.
Yeah, amen.
Can you imagine if you had to go to a priest to get a word? You had to go through all that. You had to make a sacrifice. You had to do all that, or, you had to talk to a prophet or something like that. All right, so verse 5, and it says, "And the prophet Gad said unto David, Abide not in the hold." So he's talking about the cave. "Depart, and get thee into the land of Judah." Then David departed and came into the forest of Hareth. Now notice here that the word from God did not come, as I said, through the high priest, but rather it came through this prophet named Gad. Now, somebody asked me recently if I was a prophet, and that really took me back. Because, no, I am not a prophet. But I would say that I'm someone who's done everything wrong in life. And I've learned the hard way. And I've sought out truth, and I found it. And I can make a lot of accurate predictions because I know the sin nature. And I've already been there, done that, okay? So I can pretty well look out and see what's going to happen to people, okay? And I know people. And sometimes, yes, God does give me a word for people. And it's never to hurt them. It's always to help them. And that's what this prophet was doing for David. And sometimes he's given me hard words. And sometimes they haven't been received. But still, whether the person receives them or not, they were still for the person's edification, to bring something to light that is going to destroy them. So no, I wouldn't call myself a prophet. I'd only call myself a child of God who desires to hear from the Lord. So in verse 6 it says, "When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him," because now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. "Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds?" So here comes the politics. Okay, so there's nothing new under the sun, just like Solomon said. So Saul finds out that David's not by himself, that he's got 400 men with him. And so now he's got to take this into consideration, because he himself cannot go after, David and 400 men. So now he's got to figure out how he's going to deal with this new situation. And I think this is a prime example of not isolating. Because, see, Satan wants you to isolate. See, he wants to keep teenagers in their rooms, isolated, away from their families, so that he can silently fill their heads full of crap.
If I could just interject,
Yeah.
As we were walking out the door, another messenger was on TV speaking about the deeper water, and he said, and this speaks to what you were saying, he says the deeper water is in fellowship, not isolated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, because he made us. Why did he make church? Because he knew we needed each other.
Yes. Yes.
That's exactly why he did it. And that's why he made man and woman to come together, because he said it wasn't good for man to be alone. But see, these kids are so isolated on their phones. I'm telling you what, the other night, I put something on Facebook Marketplace, and I've never done that before. And another thing, I've just only been on Facebook less than a year. In my own name, it is causing me great anxiety. And I'm getting all these friend requests from people, I have no idea who they are.
Oh,
Yeah.
just ignore them.
And then I'm getting in conversations with people about my marketplace. And then this guy had a foreign name and everything, but I looked him up and he looked okay and had a family and blah, blah, blah. Well, then he wanted me to deliver the item. And I'm like, no, and I blocked him after that. And I'm like, I couldn't sleep that night. I was so, and I'm just not used to it. I'm not used to being on Facebook. And so I thought right then, I can't do this. Now I'm going to stay on there because I am getting a lot more followers, and all I'm putting on there is devotions, but I'm getting a lot more followers than I was on the church website. So I'm going to keep doing it, but I promised myself I'm not going to keep looking at all that junk because it's bothering me. And maybe it's just my age, just because I'd never been on there before. So I just thought I just don't need this, and it just makes me nervous with all these strangers and. I don't know. So anyway, but there's this problem with, and I thought about that, and I thought, oh my gosh, these teenagers. And then I saw something come through, some parents of some kid who was bullied online on Facebook. They're trying to get some law passed or something. I'm like, my gosh, the isolation these kids are in. And the bullying online, I mean, can you imagine? Because people will just say anything online. To me, it's really scary.
And then not only that, 2020, 2021, 2022, all this COVID nonsense landed on the kids. Totally unprepared to deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had somebody that used to come to church here, and during COVID, their daughter committed suicide. So I mean, it's just awful. But you know what? He wants to isolate us. He wants us to stay away from church and from other believers. And I'm telling you what, Jeff and I used to fight. I mean, you could have won the lottery on us. We would get in the biggest fight on Sunday morning. I mean, without fail. And see why? Because I mean, it took us like 20 years to figure out what was going on. But we finally got wised up. And but see, he'll do anything to keep you from coming to church.
Yeah.
And I know people who've sat in our parking lot and who were so anxiety ridden that they couldn't come through the doors. Who do you think that is? See, he wants you to be too busy. He wants you to work on Sundays. He wants you to work on Wednesday nights. He wants you to play sports. He wants you to be too tired. He wants you to be anything to keep you away from other people. Oh, and then of course he wants you to get offended. That's a huge one. Get offended so you'll never go to church again. See, he just wants to isolate you because that's his plan. If he isolates you, he can destroy you. And in Hebrews 10:5, Paul says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as we see the day approaching. So we're supposed to help each other. We're supposed to exhort each other. We're supposed to, if you got a problem, you should feel free to come and help us, or get help.
I was just thinking that Jesus, after he was baptized, went 40 days into the wilderness or desert or whatever, and who attacked him when he was isolated?
Satan, exactly. So the reason I'm saying all this, can we fight a war on our own? No, David couldn't do it. God brought him help. And so what makes us think we can fight the devil on our own? Apart from the Word of God, apart from the Holy Spirit helping us, we're doomed. And so we need the Word, we need the Holy Spirit, we need each other. And God made us to be together. He made us to assemble together, to exhort one another, to teach one another, to edify one another. And all the more as we see that day approaching. And that day approaching, he's talking about the coming of the day of the Lord. But prior to that is the Antichrist coming. And then we see today, just even Christians, I mean, I hear it all the time, nobody's going to church. Even the Christians aren't going to church. So see what I'm saying, it's not a priority. So what are you going to do when you get cancer? Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? Who's gonna bring you food when you have an operation? Sweet Teresa brought me food when I had my appendix out. You know how much I appreciated that? See, we need each other. And so David needed these 400 men because he can't overcome Saul on his own. And he sure would have been killed. So let's look at verse 8. It says that all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. Wow, Saul is laying it on thick. Who's he blaming? His son. He's laying the whole thing at Jonathan's feet. Now, do you think that's quite fair?
Yeah.
No, it's not fair at all. He is accusing Jonathan and his servants of treachery. So he's still mad as a hornet at Jonathan for being in league with David, and evidently he knows about the covenant that they made. It doesn't tell us how he knows, but somehow he knows that they made a covenant. And now he's accusing David of being after him, to kill him. It's a lie. David's not out to kill him, but what do politicians do? They lie. McFly.
Yeah.
They all lie.
And it's all poor me, woe is me. He's the king, and yet he's like, oh, all y'all are against me.
Exactly. Exactly. And then that what the devil does, he twists the truth, and he always turns everything, on the believer. Didn't he do this to Jesus? He twisted the word. See, Saul knows he's lying.
Well, he's right in a respect that his bloodline, his ancestry, his son's not going to follow him. He's going to be dethroned.
That's true. But if he was a true man of God, well, hey, if he had been a true man of God, that wouldn't happen.
Right.
It was because of his sin that this is happening in the first place. But B, this shows that where his heart is, he doesn't care anything about God. He just cares about himself. But David is not out to kill him. So that's a lie. And Saul has no reason to believe that David is out to kill him. He's never done anything bad to him at all. So what he's doing is he's stirring up sympathy. All right? Don't we all do this?
Yeah.
See, when we have a conflict with somebody, what do we do?
Make them feel guilty.
Go to somebody else.
Usually we don't run to the throne, we run to the phone. And we look for somebody to side with us.
Yeah, the word drama pops up.
Yeah. We look for somebody to side with us, and somebody to tell our story to, and somebody to get sympathy from. And sometimes we'll go to great lengths.
Well, we want them to agree with us.
Of course.
We were so offended.
Exactly. And you know how I know? Because I've done it. And I've had it done to me. And it's a hard situation because the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely true.
So see, if we can absolutely be wrong, and we can persuade people, with lies to get on our side. And then I thought about Jesus. Jesus kept his mouth shut when he was accused. See, he didn't go on a political campaign to get people on his side. So we need to learn from this. Here again, what can we learn from this? We can learn from this to be careful who we listen to. And I'm not telling you not to listen, but I'm saying there's always two sides to every story. And until you make a judgment on who's right and who's wrong, you better listen to both sides. Because the truth is always somewhere in between. And we need to take it to the Lord, and we need to ask him who is telling the truth. And it made me think of the story of the Solomon when the two mothers came to him and brought the baby. Both mothers said that baby was theirs. Now science tells us that the baby only could have one mother. Now they want to tell you today you can have two mothers, but you really can't. You can only have one mother. Okay? And so they bring the baby to Solomon, and they both swear that this is their baby. One of them's telling the truth. How's Solomon going to know? And so he does something absolutely brilliant, and he tells his servants to cut the baby in half and give one half to each parent.
And as a mother, you know what he is.
Oh my gosh, you'd absolutely no way. So the real mother said, no, give her the baby. So she's protecting the baby's life by letting the liar and the thief and the kidnapper, or whatever else you want to call her, give her the baby to save the baby's life. So then Solomon knew who the real mother was.
Yes.
So now these men of Saul, they've got a judgment call to make. Now this is not a democracy. This is a king, right? So if you defy the king, you're most likely going to either get your head cut off, or you're going to hope to the good Lord that David's going to win against Saul. And it probably doesn't look too good. So they got to decide, are we going to be loyal to the king and we're going to believe that he's telling the truth and we're going to turn on him, side with him, or we're going to risk getting our heads cut off and side with a nobody? So when you think about that story in relation to Jesus and the disciples, see, those disciples had a choice to make. They literally had to decide with the law, the way they grew up, all their traditions, all that the Torah said, all, the Old Testament said, or they're going to side with Jesus. Because really, one fulfilled the other, but they didn't see that. They were in contrast. So there's a lot of shady things going on in our government today, and people are going to jail and losing all that they have because they're being brought up on charges in the courts for being associated with our former president. So guess what? It's nothing new. It's the same old, over and over again. And it's always going to be man's inclination to side with the one in power at the time. So let's look and see what happens. So verse 9, it says, Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. Now I thought it was interesting, according to some, this is a mistranslation, for Doeg the Edomite was not over the servants of Saul, but he was a chief herdsman to Saul. And the Bible said he was standing near the servants of Saul.
Yeah. The NIV says standing with Saul's officials.
Okay, so the KJV says that he was set over the servants of Saul, but he really wasn't. He was just standing near the servants of Saul. And now the historical Jewish record of who this man was, they did say, now he was an Edomite, he was not Jewish, okay, and so he was a Gentile, but they did say that he was like one of the most learned men of their time. So they all knew him, and evidently, he was pretty famous. And he's mentioned in Psalms 52 and Colossians 2. So I think, in comparison, maybe he's like, Doeg is maybe like Himmler or Goring to Saul. So David wrote in Psalms 52 that Doeg had a sharp tongue like a razor and was wicked. He was a liar, and yet he was learned and skilled in the law. Talking about the law of God. Now, he was not a Jew, but he was in the midst of these Benjamites, because Saul was a Benjamite. So there was 12 tribes of Israel. Benjamin was one of them, and Saul came from the tribe of Benjamin, so all his cohorts were Benjamites. So you could say that Doeg is another type of Satan, because he's making lying accusations in order to see David murdered for nothing. So it says in 1 Samuel 21:7 that Doeg was detained before the Lord. Now I thought that was very interesting. He was detained before the Lord, so that he heard and he saw David talking to Ahimelech, the high priest that replaced Samuel. He knew that David ate the showbread, remember? Because he was on the run and he had nothing to eat, so he ate the showbread. And then the priest gave it to him. And Ahimelech gave David his Goliath sword. Remember? Because he said, "Do you have a sword?" And he said, "No, all I have is Goliath's sword." And of course, he's the one who killed Goliath, so I can see why, he gave it to him. And then we're going to see in 1 Samuel 22:18 that Saul is going to send Doeg to murder all the priests that were in Nob, which are 85 in all, out of sheer spite. See, Satan's after all of us. He's after us to kill us because he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care what color you are. He doesn't care how old you are. He doesn't care how much education you have. He's after you from the time you take your first, he's after you before you take your first breath. Because he's after you because you're made in the image of God. And that's the whole reason he hates you. So Doeg was there at the temple when David escaped Saul. And remember that David didn't know this new high priest that had replaced Samuel. And because I guess Samuel had died. And so he makes up this story, David does, to tell the high priest. He eats the showbread. And then the high priest gives him Goliath's sword because that was the only weapon he had. And then in verse 10, it says, "And he inquired of the Lord for him." Now this is Doeg talking. "And he inquired of the Lord," talking about Ahimelech, the high priest, "inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistines." Now just like Satan with Jesus, there's some untruths in here. There's some truth and there's some untruth. So Doeg tells King Saul that the high priest Ahimelech inquired of God for him. All right, now, how would a high priest inquire of God for you? Yes. So it was a vest that the high priest wore, and it had these big precious stones in it, in a row. And then, I don't know, we don't know exactly how it worked, but somehow you ask the Lord a question, and I don't know how they determine, yes or no, or however, I don't think anybody knows. But anyway, whatever stone would light up giving you an answer. And so that's how you would see God. And there again, aren't you glad we don't have to do that? Oh my gosh. Okay, the topaz lights up. How am I supposed to know what that means? I know they knew somehow, but I don't know how that worked.
So it was just a yes or no answer.
Well, I don't know. And I don't think the Jews even know. I don't think they know how that works. But I never read anything that anybody knew how it worked.
That's not in Leviticus.
So of course we know that yes, he gave him victuals. Yes, he ate of the showbread. Yes, he took Saul's Goliath's sword. But no, the priest never said that the priest sought God for him. And I don't think David would do that because he doesn't know if he can trust him. So he would have had to answer, he would have had to have asked an incriminating question to get an answer. And he doesn't want to incriminate himself because he doesn't know this new high priest and he doesn't know that he can trust him. So this is just a lie. All right, verse 11. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. All right, so now King Saul's got this information from Doeg, and now he is super mad. So he says, give me Ahimelech, give me the high priest, you give me all of the priests that were there that day. And you bring them to me, all those priests that were in Nob that day. So the Saul servants go out and get him, and you know, this is how cruel he is. This is how cruel Satan is. He didn't want to just kill the priests. He wanted to kill their wives, and their children. So he's not satisfied with just getting them. And of course, all these priests are from the tribe of Levi, because you had to be a Levite to be a priest. And they worked in shifts. Okay? And there was a tremendous amount of work to do, because, I mean, you got thousands of animals being slaughtered every day. It was a lot of work. And so you had to have a lot. So there was 80. Didn't I what I said? 85. There was 85 priests on duty when David went to talk to Ahimelech. All right, so verse 12. And Saul said, "Hear now, thou son of Ahitub." And he answered, "Here I am, my lord." So Saul is addressing the high priest, Ahimelech, who represents God for the whole nation of Israel. And pay attention how Saul addresses him. He says, "Hear now, thou son of Ahitub." He doesn't address him as a high priest. He just addresses him by his father's name. But he's the high priest of Israel. So he's not showing him honor. And this told me something. It shows me that we need to show honor and respect to the man or woman of God. And I think God takes it very seriously. And he said, "Do not touch the Lord's anointed."
Yeah.
And Saul is about to touch the Lord's anointed. And of course, David is God's anointed. And you can read that in Psalms 105. And isn't that why David wouldn't hurt Saul?
Yes.
Because he said, "I'm not going to strike God's anointed."
Yes.
And then we know that the Bible says that the gifts and callings are without repentance. Now I know I can think of somebody else off my head that has a call of God on his life, but he is a scoundrel and he needs to be in jail. But he was a preacher. And that gift and calling is without repentance. It wasn't God who just like Saul.
Right.
It's not that God removed it, it's that Saul removed himself from God's calling. God doesn't ever remove it, it's you remove yourself. All right, verse 13. And Saul said unto him, "Why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as at this day?" Saul's making false accusations. Isn't that what Satan does? And yes, I got news for you. Satan works through people. And he has people do this very thing. He has people make false accusations and lie about you and say ugly things. And this is just what Satan does. And then how about this? The Bible says we're to think good of all people, which is really hard to do. Okay? And I was thinking about, why do you think God tells us to do that when he knows good and well that I would say the majority of people we know are really not good. And yet he tells us to think good of all people. I think because if you think the worst of everybody, you can't even live a joyful life like that.
No.
Yeah.
You're just tormented in your mind.
And in Romans it says, "Consider all better than yourself." It doesn't say they are.
Yes.
But it says, count them as though they are.
Yes. I think it's just a state of a healthy mind.
Yes, because you would have a bad attitude if you didn't do that.
Yeah, it'd be like paranoia. How's he
Yes.
looking at me? You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the joy, like you said, joy would be gone.
And then of course if you give in to that, then what happens is you start getting vain imaginations. And then you think, we all think we know what somebody's thinking. Well, I got news for you. I've lived long enough to know that I was usually wrong when I thought I knew what somebody was thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
But Satan, he'll tell you that so-and-so thinks this about you, so-and-so is saying that, and most of the time it's wrong. So The Lord's just wanting us to just stay in peace, and you just can't stay in peace if you're just constantly thinking you know what somebody thinks about you or how somebody feels about you or whatever. So picture this scene. Think about you've been called to the boss's office, and you're never called to the boss's office. I highly doubt you're there to get a raise, right? I mean, it's a possibility, but most of the time you're not there to get a raise, right? You're there because you're in trouble. Ahimelech is never called in front of the king. He's called there because he's in trouble. All right, and I'm sure he knows this. And so not just him, but all those 80 priests. So they got to have figured this out. And so they come to see Saul, and they know this can't be good, and it's not. And then Saul is making these untrue accusations against him. And then think about this: the high priest, he had no way of knowing that David was on the run. He didn't know he didn't know that Saul was trying to kill David. He didn't know any of this. And all he knew was that David was his son-in-law. So he just believed what he said. And now he's being called on the carpet. So let's look at verse 14. Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who is so faithful among all the servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house?" Well, now this is going to make Saul mad.
Yeah, and Saul had put him in charge of all these
Yeah.
people in the army.
So Ahimelech he's befuddled. He's like, well, I don't understand what's going on. Who is more faithful to you, King Saul, than David? So he's blindsided by this accusation, and he has no idea what's going on. He's clueless. He doesn't know that anything's wrong. But this is not going to satisfy the bloodlust that Saul has, that he has allowed Satan to put into his heart. See, Saul doesn't care that Ahimelech acted out of ignorance. Satan doesn't care if he lies to your face. He doesn't care if he lies about you to other people. He's going to use anything, anybody, any person willing to come against you, just as we see here, because Satan doesn't care. So verse 15, he said, "Did I then begin to inquire of God for him?" Question mark. "Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more." Now this is interesting because Ahimelech is saying, did I inquire of God for him? Question mark. So what he's saying, no, I didn't ask God for anything for David. And David didn't ask me to ask God anything. And I'm sure if he did, it would have been stated in some previous chapters, and it wouldn't be here with a question mark. So Ahimelech is what he's doing. He's saying, look, king, I'm innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. And but see, it's not enough for Saul, and it's never going to be enough for Satan. So if you've ever been lied about, or if this happens to you in the future, then you have one thing to do, and that's to run to King Jesus and tell him that you're being falsely accused. And ask him to show you who's right and who's wrong. And ask him to set things straight. Because in the flesh, there's nothing that Ahimelech can do. I mean, he can't defend himself against the king. And there may be nothing you can do. I'll give you an example. I was falsely accused at work. Still to this day, I do not know what happened. I don't know what prompted it. I don't know anything. I'm as dumbfounded today as I was back then. And it was a horrible situation, and I did not handle it well because I went off the deep end, because that's who I am. And 2 days later, I owned the business. Now, I didn't go to the courts or anything like that. It wasn't anything like that. It was God orchestrated it. And I was quitting because I'm not going to work for somebody who doesn't trust me, because I didn't do anything. And 2 days later, I owned the business. That was God avenging me and working it out for my good. I mean, there's no possible way that in the natural, it wasn't even my idea. I couldn't have done that. You know what I'm saying? And like I say, to this day, I don't even know what even brought that on. But I know I didn't do anything. And God would not have orchestrated all that had I done something. I certainly wouldn't have come out smelling like a rose, okay, if I had done anything. So I've been there, done that. And I've seen it play out so many times that it's not even funny, because I've had so many things happen to me like that. And then verse 16 it says, and the king said, thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. Again, Satan at work. This is what Satan wants to do to you. This is what he wants to do for me. He doesn't give a flying flip about anybody, right? He's a created being that is out to destroy anything that God made. So we are all fallen human beings, and I have seen someone come along and say something, you know, tell me they're my best friend, right? And then they do something and stab me in the back. I'm just encouraging us. Let's be real and let's guard against that, and let's don't hurt people. This is why people don't want to go to church.
Yeah.
See, loyalty is a thing that's passed in our society. Nobody's loyal anymore. I tell you what, being in business down here and then hearing what it's like up in where Jeff's from, you know, that town is pretty much the same as it's always been. When I grew up in Roswell, it was about 10,000 people. Okay? So yeah, back then, you know, you could do things on a handshake, everybody knew each other, you know. We probably had, I'm not kidding, I don't remember now, James, 500 people at my dad's funeral? All these people, we had 2 nights of visitation.
There was over 1,000 people that showed up between the funeral and the
It was packed at Roswell Funeral Home. I cannot tell you how many people came up and told me that my dad was their best friend. I'm like, half the people I didn't even know. And yet, that was something that will always stay with me. They considered him their best friend, and I didn't even know him. So that tells you he was a man of integrity, and that people valued him and valued his friendship. I mean, I'd be lucky if I get 5 people at my funeral. But things are different now. And then being in business, I'm telling you what, there is 1% loyalty. You go up north, where that town is still the same way, it hadn't changed, nothing, you know, hadn't been overrun, you know, they've got the same insurance agent that they've had for 30 years. Here, I have to fight every year to keep that business. It's just totally different.
If I could just interject on that, I found the Atlanta market to be like you just described. But working in remote areas of Georgia as I have, there's a red, white, blue, small town loyalty.
Yes, it's different.
It's
It's
Atlanta.
different.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
So there's a spirit over Atlanta.
And there is. And I'm telling you what, and I know this is something I'm fighting because I'm not out working every day. So when I do get out, I'm really having to fight. I've never had worry or anxiety or anything, ever. I've never had any of that. But you know what? Everybody's mad.
That's right.
Everywhere I go. Okay, no joke. I was pulling weeds at my mailbox the other day. This man, he walks through our neighborhood all the time. I don't think he lives in our neighborhood because we got a neighborhood right across the street, and a lot of those people walk their dogs in our yards and our neighborhood. But anyway, so I see him all the time, and he's got 2 great big old dogs. So I'm at my mailbox on my knees pulling weeds, right? And so he comes up, and I wouldn't have even known he was there, but the one big dog is trying to get to me. So he's wrestling with that dog, you know, pulling it back and stuff. And I mean, he's got him and everything. And so I smile, I look up, I smile, and I said, hey. And so I thought, well, he didn't hear me. So I said, hey. Never did smile. He looked me straight in the eyes, never smiled, never spoke, never nothing. You know how bad that bothered me? I mean, either he's deaf or he's an idiot.
Probably did.
Well, he's cold, and his heart's cold.
How can somebody speak to you and you not even say hello?
Yeah, it's just dark.
I mean, it's that way everywhere I go. I mean, I'm really having to get to where I gotta pray before I go out of the house.
Yeah.
He saw it as your fault that his dog.
Probably.
That's
right.
Everybody wants to blame it on somebody else.
I mean, it just floors me. The world is just completely different than the way I grew up. And to have it happen here, I've been here all my life, except for 4 years in the Navy. I mean, you know what I mean? And when I went in the Navy and came back, it was just like, oh my, I mean, it literally from 81 to 84, or from 81 to 85, it literally just exploded. I couldn't even find my way around. There were so many new roads and businesses and buildings, and you know, I remember when the first McDonald's came to Roswell. There wasn't even a McDonald's. There was nothing. You had to go to Atlanta, or we went to Sandy Springs to McDonald's. There was nothing in Roswell. So it just grieves me and it pains me. But we're just fallen human beings, and and this happens to us, and we've got to. I just want us to guard against being like all these other people. And I'm fighting that, wanting to isolate, and we can't do that. You know, we got to fight that and let God, you know, overcome all this stuff for us. And just to reiterate, and I got to stop, is we should just never believe one side over the other. Let's get both sides before we make a decision, and always hear both sides out, and then take it to God and ask Him to tell us, you know, where the truth is. And these are just some things I'm saying, like when you're reading the Old Testament, these are some things you can dig out. And you can think about, put yourself in David's position, put yourself in that story, and think about, okay, how does this story apply to my life? What can I learn from this story? And I think this is a conflict between two human beings, and we can learn from this. When people are having a conflict, when people are lying about you, then we can go to the Word and we can say, Lord, I need a word, and He may send you to this story if you're having a conflict with somebody, and read the story and find out what was done right and what was done wrong.
I just feel that, and I hate to use those words, I just feel, but anyway, whatever happened to minding our own business? You know, why do we need to know both sides? You know?
Well, I'm saying if you're, now like in a position of leadership, of course I've had people accuse me of all kinds of things. I've been accused of stealing their husbands, I've been accused of, you name it, I've been accused of it. I'm just saying, we're all going to get in conflicts. I mean, just because we live in a broken world. So conflicts are just going to come. Yeah. And we just need to guard and make sure, we don't side with one over the other. We had some friends whose daughter was, she was 15, but she was molested by a 50-something-year-old guy. And I started hearing the rumors, and I said, I'm not going to believe it until I hear it straight from one of those parents' mouths. I'm not going to believe it. So this is a good example, because you're going to hear things. And so, we had a couple leave here because I was after somebody's husband. They never came to me and asked me. They just left. Well, I got news for you. He died, and the Lord took him. Because he's the one who fell in love with me and was writing me love notes and all this kind of stuff. They needed to come and talk to me and get my side of it. Because I was completely innocent. Okay? I wouldn't have given you 2 cents for that man. Okay? Truth be known.
And we had the emails.
And I had the emails to prove it.
These old heads don't realize.
And as soon as I got the emails, I turned it over to, at the time, our associate pastor, because I didn't want Jeff to flip out and go off the deep end, so I turned it into our associate pastor the very day that they came in. But anyway, what was I saying?
Well, I was going to give just a small example. The other day, I was with family, and they were arguing we're debating about something. And it was just something really small about energy drinks or something, and a couple were saying, you know, he was saying, it's good for me, they give me whatever, and they were saying, no, it's not good for you, and it just kept going back and forth. And I just went, you know what, you're an adult, search it out. Have you searched out the matter? Have you, if you don't agree with them, then let's just stop the debating. You're an adult, you go online, you check it out, you check out some sources about energy drinks, and then you make a decision whether you want to do it or not. But I said, I think they're right, but I haven't searched out the matter, right? Like really dug into it. And it's like, we really, with Christianity, everything, you know, quit debating about, you know, somebody search out the matter, just like with a couple of years ago, what happened, you know, people made a quick decision and just went with that decision and then got upset because other people were searching out the matter and making a decision, a wise decision for themselves.
How was that received?
And you know what, it stopped the argument.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they quit kind of picking on him and he quit saying, because it's like, you search out the matter, you're not a child, and just see what you think the right
And
decision
you
is.
choose for yourself.
And choose for yourself,
Don't try to tell somebody else how they need to live.
right?
Tell them maybe to investigate, you ought to look into this because it's not good for you, but.
And that's what I told him. I said, but, you know, when you look into it, then you need to decide, if you see it's not good for you, then you need to decide, are you gonna do it anyway, just because you want to? Well, then, okay then. You know, but we don't need to sit here and debate it without you searching out the matter.
Yes, and you've done your job when you pointed it out to them.
Exactly.
It's not up to you to control their life.
Right,
So I
right.
remember what I was gonna say was, that molestation deal, the mother told me that was going on. So then I believed it, right? But in this case, see what we all do, and this I'm trying to make us be better people and grow. Okay, what we all do is we're gonna defend what we're doing that we know we shouldn't be doing. So what he was doing was he was defending what he knows he shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
All right, if I'm smoking, dipping, chewing, okay, you know, drinking in excess, eating in excess, well, I know I'm not supposed to do that. My waistline will tell me if I eat too much pie, you know, but what we do is, well, we want to defend that,
yeah,
you know, because we want to hold on to what we want to hold on to.
right,
Is this not what Saul's doing?
yes.
So that was great because only he can decide.
Right.
You know, you can't zip his lips shut and make him quit drinking energy drinks. Now, when he ends up in the ER from drinking energy drinks, which we've known people that's happened to on several occasions, do we not, Pastor Jeff? And that's exactly what they went in there for, was from drinking energy drinks.
Now, granted, they were drinking 10 to 12 a day.
Yeah.
Now, people
Yeah.
drink it up to as many as 20 in a day.
Oh, 20, yeah, so the average was,
The monster, what's that called, monster?
Yeah.
Monster Energy.
Monster drinks.
Yeah, his liver was actually swelling.
Wow.
And his heart was having problems.
Well, hard is one of the worst things.
But the bottom line is, we're going to do what we're going to do.
Yes.
And nobody's going to tell us what we're going to do.
Yeah.
But that's another thing we can work on. And you know what, if somebody calls us out on something, it's like, you know, be a man or a woman, say, yeah, I know I shouldn't eat that, I know I shouldn't drink that, I know I shouldn't do that, but you know what, I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Right. And you're not gonna be able to.
Exactly.
The reason I asked Teresa what, sorry, she called me John last week.
Just don't call me late for that.
But anyway, what was the result is that a lot of times, two people that are butting heads and someone chimes in, they both turn against that person.
Yeah.
By your own
Yeah,
party.
really.
Yeah, who asked you?
Well, everybody was chiming in, so I just said, okay, this needs to stop. And it did.
That was good. All right, so I hope y'all got something out of this, and let's don't be Saul, let's be David. And let's take everything to the Lord, and Lord, if I'm having a problem with such and such, then Lord, you just help me, because I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be Saul.
Amen.
I want to be a David. David's not perfect, but David knew the Lord. Yeah. But the key is that he went to the Lord, he sought the Lord. So just seek the Lord, and let's be the best people we can be.